Hey guys, welcome into my live stream, and today I'm going to wrap up this Ncase M1. I have to say, this is an original version 1 of the Ncase M1. This case is very, very tiny. The idea behind it was to cram as much computing power as possible into the smallest chassis possible. And so this thing has room for a liquid cooler, for an external liquid cooler reservoir if need be. One of the things I like about all-in-one coolers is that you don't have to deal with the reservoirs. But it has room. I think you can put up to 5 hard drives in this thing. And you can use a regular ATX power supply instead of using this bracket here that can hold a fan or a couple of hard drives. Or you can take this off and put 2 fans, or put a liquid cooler on half, or a liquid cooler on the whole thing. Like an all-in-one radiator can go, depending on the size of the radiator, in this bracket. But with a full-size ATX power supply, this bracket has to come out, and the small form factor power supply bracket has to come out. So what happened, if you missed the very first part of this video, was I had removed the motherboard, CPU, and RAM that I had in the train computer, along with the hard drive. And I did find the box for that, by the way. It's a Gigabyte Z77N Wi-Fi motherboard, which I purchased about 3 years ago, and it's with a Core i3 processor, and just haven't used it. I haven't had any need for it, and this has always been, for me, just a fun project to do on the side, and so it kind of sat and collected dust for a while, and this is version 1 of the case. They're now up to version 5. They made some pretty minor revisions. Things like the fan filters no longer are attached with screws. They're now magnetized, which I don't know why it wasn't that way right from the get-go. They've changed I think the way the USB ports are on it. They've modified that a bit to be more friendly, I suppose. But of all the cases I've worked on, and especially when it comes to mini ITX cases, this by far exceeds it is the best mini ITX case I've ever worked on. And they're not a sponsor. I paid $185 for this case. I think that's what I paid for it. That's what they sell for today. And it's not cheap, but it's a very good high quality case. If I had all the money in the world, I'd be putting something more powerful in it. And what I've decided is, I'm like, why do I have a solid state drive in this Core i3? I've got a bunch of old hard drives laying around, and what I've got is a Western Digital 500 gig black edition. It's just laying around. I might as well use it. I'd rather use the SSD in a faster, more deserving system. And the SSD really does make a difference in the performance. And once again, if I'm swimming around in money, I would have the SSD and the mechanical drive. However, I don't know what I'm going to use this computer for. I've got quite a bit of money sunk into it at this point. You're looking at $185 for the case. I bought a small form factor power supply from SilverStone. I just got the 300 watt, which is like $60. I just spent that. I got a slot loading DVD drive, which just arrived in the mail today. I haven't found any information as to whether or not this will work. A lot of people recommend the SilverStone DVD drive, but it's got a face on the front of it, a fascia, which this doesn't need. And because it's prettier, I guess, and it's got SilverStone's name, they want like $60 or $70 for it. So I thought, you know what, it's just an optical drive. I should be able to just use anything that comes from a Dell or an HP, laptop replacement part. That's a slot loading. It's got to be slot loading. So that came in the mail today, and it was hanging. They stuck it in a bubble pack envelope. So it was half hanging out of the package. I hope it works. I've also noticed on the back of these Slimline drives that you typically see in laptops, let me come around to the camera, they have a really strange SATA port. It's called, I think it's just called a slim SATA port. And what it is the data connector, I believe, is the same, but the power connector is really, really tiny. And unless I've got those backwards, I think that's the way it is. And I guess it's the only reason they do that is to save a couple millimeters, I guess, for the plug when you're building a laptop. I don't know. Got to be a reason behind it. So I had to go online and buy this adapter, which I will show you. This is from StarTech, and this is a little adapter that will convert that slim power and SATA connector to the normal, so I can plug normal power supply cable on there and a normal SATA drive cable, data cable on there. And I'm sure there's probably cheaper versions of this that don't have the name brand. I don't even know if you guys can read that. But that has to go with the drive. So when we add everything up, we've got another $30 in the drive, $60 for the power supply. I went ahead and got a Noctua NFA9. It's a 92 millimeter fan. This case does not come with any fans. And I'd like to put a fan just here on the rear exhaust. I don't need one on the bottom, or two on the bottom as the case may be. And I thought what I would do today is just fire up the stream and finish this computer off. I'm going to take the SSD out, replace it with the mechanical drive, and mount the mechanical drive in the bracket. I'm going to take out the ATX power supply so that bracket can fit, and replace it with the SilverStone power supply I just purchased, which is the small form factor power supply. And I was adding up how much I had in this, wasn't I? So at $185, figure the motherboard, RAM, and CPU, we'll call that $200 at this point, right? I think that's fair for the board, RAM, and CPU. So that's $385. It was $60 for the power supply. That puts us at $445. The hard drive has no value. The optical drive, let's call it another $30, so we're at $475. Windows 10, home, 64 bits, $100, we're at $575. And, you know, one of the things I don't like, this board has built-in Wi-Fi, but my router is much, much faster than the Wi-Fi built into the board. And this is why I don't like built-in Wi-Fi. It goes obsolete awfully quick if performance is your main concern. So this is just a 300 megabit per second Wi-Fi. I've got 1900 AC. So there's a pretty big performance difference in data transfer rates between the two. This also has Bluetooth 4.0 in it, which I don't know if I'll use, but that's part of the Wi-Fi that's built onto the board. It's a socket 1155 board. So it's not like it's ancient or anything. It's still very viable in the market today. This other box I've got is a StarTech external HD capture card, and I thought when I was all done with this, I'll fire it up on YouTube, and I'll have to run a hard line to it because I don't think the wireless is going to be fast enough, and see if it's going to be powerful enough to do the live streaming smoothly. So that'll be sort of the end of the video when we get to that. We take a moment to say hello to everybody in the chat. DJ Dave Voom, Airbus Fun, Jorge Dallin, D. Litton, somebody who's just a bunch of zeros. I see my friend Ron is hanging out. Ron Hillier's in the chat. Hey Ron, always good to see you, buddy. Greg 20711. Just saying hello to folks, just as I see their names. The Circuit Wizard. Chris Zortzatos from Athens. Steve Bennett. Ostindo. Joseph Neal. No Guy 3. Dylan Griffin, Richard Daines, Sean Courtney, Mike Rooney, Renus, Tech Gaming, Chris Garrett, Joseph C., Hyper Joe, Casper Ag, Caleb Nestor, the Mac Geek, Declan Kennedy. So hi to all of you guys. Thanks for joining me on the live stream. And obviously I can't read all 244 names that are in there right now, but you keep hanging out. Sooner or later I'll give you a shout out. So what I want to do now is just start the work. I need to take this one screw out. They got rid of this screw. It's another little minor revision that version 5 of this case no longer requires a screw to hold this top panel in. I didn't understand why the side panel that's facing me pops right out without any screws. This panel here had 2 screws in it, and the top I just thought didn't make any sense. It shouldn't require screws, so they corrected that. I'm not sure why I wasn't part of the crowdfunding process and how they just made decisions on what was being done, so I'm sure there was a reasoning behind it, but they've since changed their mind. But I just love how this case just comes apart so easily. And I think I want to start by putting the optical drive in, because I'm curious if that optical drive is going to fit. And like I said, because it was hanging out of its package when I received it earlier today, I don't even know if it's going to work if it does fit. I also found out that those little teeny tiny screws I suspected were for the optical drive, and that's what the instructions say. They're for the optical drive. I'm going to go ahead and remove the solid state drive. I'm not going to use that in this build. I have changed my mind, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this power supply out. I know I'm kind of standing in the way of the camera. Just be patient with me for just a minute while I get this all sorted so that I can work in here. One of the great things about this case is how easy it is to work on. There's such a confined area to work within any mini ITX case that it can really be frustrating and challenging to do a build. And I don't recommend you do any first-time build in a mini ITX case unless you're really up for a challenge. It's sort of like if you've never built a model before, you shouldn't start out with the advanced, the model for advanced builders, people that have built models before. You should start with a beginner's kit. Familiarize yourself with how things go together and the way the instructions explain things. And then once you've succeeded at that, then move up to, the next level. There's usually 3 levels. And in the case of computers, I recommend people start with like a Corsair 200R, or, fairly at least mid-tower case, so that you have lots of room to work within, no sharp edges to deal with getting yourself cut, and lots of room to get your hands in there so that you'll have a good first experience and encourage you to pursue wanting to build more rather than getting angry and frustrated. So this is an old Thermaltake 700 watt power supply. I've had this thing for years. I think this used to power my main computer, and ended up replacing it, I think, with like a Corsair CX 430 or something, which is 80 plus efficient. This has no power efficiency rating at all, but it works. It's good to kick around as a spare. I've never seen a power supply tester that worked, that was accurate. So the best power supply tester is to have a spare power supply, and that's what that is. And then if somebody really needs one, obviously it can be put back into service. It's just used, so who knows how long it'll last. Could go another 10 years for all I know. Now, I've got the power supply out, and I've got the solid state drive out. You see just how open this case is for me to work on. This is almost, I have never seen this before on an ITX case where I can put my whole hand in there and have so much room to work on it. And again, it's $185 for the case. And for a lot of people, they go, look, I got $300 or $400 to spend on a computer. You're obviously not going to be building with a case like this. Ideally, a $185 case deserves much more expensive parts inside of it. However, because there's no sponsors on the channel, all the parts you see for these builds that I'm doing for fun are coming out of my pocket. So because I have no use for this computer, I just put together the most decent thing I can get that was still, both reliable but also inexpensive, which is why I stuck with a Gigabyte board, which is a little bit more money, and stuck with an Intel processor, which is a little bit more money. But clearly, I could change the processor out and put a Core i7 in there. With the Z7-7, I could overclock, but this isn't really the best venue for overclocking with regards to cooling, because an ITX case is always going to have cooling issues. I don't know that you can ever get around that. However, they have put in a lot of cooling options. Both fans can go on the bottom of the case, on the rear of the case, and on the side to help keep a graphics card cool. Now, because I don't have a separate graphics card, we're running on the graphics that are built into the Intel CPU. I don't think we're going to have any heat problems at all, and I really don't even think I need the rear exhaust fan. I just want it because that's the way I generally build computers, and I want to build this one consistently the same as I build others. And I could have bought a cheaper fan than a Noctua, but you know the difference between a cheap fan and a Noctua fan is $10. If it's $6 for the cheap fan and $16 for the Noctua, I'll spend the $16. It's not going to be like I'm not going to eat this month because I spent $10 more. And that's the logic I use when I'm building. I'm not always just trying to find the cheapest prices. I'm trying to find the cheapest prices for the best part that I can get. And the best part isn't always the most expensive part. Sometimes it is. I'm not aware of a fan rated better than Noctua in general. I know that Corsair has their levitating fans. They're magnet. They don't use any bearing. But I've heard they're very loud. So I want to keep the noise down. This system is very quiet. I want to keep it that way. And I've already pre-installed Windows 10 on this hard drive and activated it, so we won't have to wait for the reinstall. As soon as I get this together, we can fire it up and see if it all works. So let me see if I can get this optical drive installed. Now the optical drive has two very, very tiny holes for screws. They're very, very small. And I think they're like M2 screws. They're very tiny. And I've got the bag of screws here somewhere. And like I said, if you recall in the first episode, I had this bag of these little tiny screws. Let me see if I can just give you an idea how small these things are. I mean, if you drop one of these, good luck finding it. They are super tiny. And the holes on the side of the drive, I'm not quite sure if you can really appreciate how small the holes are, but they are. You'd think it would be this one, right? But you'd be wrong. It's a little teeny tiny thing, right? Right underneath my finger. It's very, very tiny. And that's what those are for. These, I'm sure my camera's going to have a hard time focusing that close up, but they're so small, if I pulled it further away, you're not going to be able to see them. They are the smallest computer screws I've ever seen. In fact, I think I need to stay on this side of the counter to do this. But what I'm going to do is pull this front cover off. It should just pull straight off. There we go. And this drive, like I said, I was trying to find what drives were compatible with this. And in theory, any slot loading drive should work. However, that's clearly not going to work because of how far it sticks out on this side. So I might have an issue, or I might have it backwards. Is that it? No, can't. Yeah, there we go. It helps if you know what you're doing. Look at that. That's pretty cool. I mean, without even securing it in place, it just drops right in. I like that. And because it's slot loading, there's no drawer to open and close here. So within this bag now, I've stapled it closed so that I wouldn't lose these little tiny screws. I should be able then to take this staple out, which may be the toughest part of this whole job. There we go. And then I want to just carefully dump out these screws. I'm going to need 4. I'm going to need 2 for each side. You know, one of the problems of working on carpeting is not only just the static discharge, but if you drop one of these screws in carpet, good luck finding it. Now, somewhere in here, we've got a hole for that screw to go into. There it is. Ah, I caught it. Those are my bodacious cat-like reflexes. Caught on camera. I don't know if this goes as high up. I think it does. Well, Jim, I'm gonna put this drive all the way to the top because I think that's where it needs to go. I'm not certain. I have never installed a slot loading DVD drive in any computer ever, and I very rarely have needed to replace an optical drive in a laptop, but when I do, it's usually one screw, the whole drive slides out, and you slide the new one in. It's done and over with before I have time to really think about it, so it hasn't like left a lasting memory. So if I've changed out a slot loading DVD, I have no recollection of doing it. So again, I'm going to raise that up as high as I can get it and then tighten the screws down. There we go. And then I'm going to do the two on the other side here. I guess you could lose one screw. They give you 5 even though you only need 4, so they must do that in case you lose one, because nothing takes 5 screws. And these are the only piece of hardware where these screws would be used. So if you're building an Ncase without an optical drive, you obviously won't need these screws. And they do sell a version of the case that has a different lid without the little slot in the top, and that you can place a hard drive in here instead. Actually, I think a hard drive can go on the other side. I think you can mount either a 2.5-inch drive here or a 3.5-inch drive. I think, I'm not sure, because when the power supply goes in, it's going to block that area pretty tight. Maybe you can certainly put a 2.5-inch drive on this side for sure. It's not going to be thick enough for a 3.5-inch desktop drive, but a solid state drive would fit in there. The case has so many variables, so many things that you can change to meet your hardware requirements. And it just goes to show you that, you know, I've said it before, I'll say it again, you do get what you pay for in this industry. And they've been doing really well with this case. This has been going on for a few years now, and they continue to make what are ultimately minor improvements to the case. And what they end up doing if you want to buy one is they have to place an order in batches. Like, they need a certain minimum amount before they can place an order. And they don't have big pockets to, you know, pay for a huge order and sell them later. They need pretty much everybody to put their money up, and then when they get enough for an order, they place the order. And you have to wait a couple weeks typically before your parts arrive. And then they start over again, and they start collecting funds for another order. And that's how that works. So there is our optical drive mounted, and then I need to put this little adapter on the bottom of it. And this is going to go right like this. Once again, I'm not exactly sure why this is necessary, why they couldn't have just built the drive with that in there. I'm sure there's some reason. It's such a small connector already. It just bothers me because I don't know why it's being done. Then of course when this gets put back on, which I don't want to do just yet, we're going to end up, you know, the drive's going to be completely hidden, and we'll just be able to slot load from the top. And the other thing, like I say, on the SilverStone slot loading DVD drive, it's got an eject button that would do us no good on this case because the drive is completely hidden away. You cannot press an eject button if one exists, which was another reason that I decided to try a drive that was less than half the price of the SilverStone, for a couple of reasons. One, this is again just a Core i3. I don't have a lot of money into it, and all the parts should sort of be equivalent to each other. That's why I'm pulling the SSD out of it. I know it's going to make a performance hit by pulling the SSD out, but it doesn't make sense to put a $150 or even $100 solid state drive in it and be limited on hard drive space when this, you know, and then have to add another drive for storage. You know, if I could put a 500 gig or 1 terabyte SSD, I'd be happy with a single drive, but it's going to significantly cost more. Basically, it'd be a 500 gig solid state drive. I can pick up the MX300 from Crucial for about $160, but there's no single part in here that's $160. I don't think the motherboard by itself, or the CPU by itself, or the RAM by itself was $160. That's why I'm saying it doesn't really make any sense to put that in there. So anyway, that's the way the slot drive installs. And then when it comes to this bracket's going to go in this way, I believe. Yeah, it's going to go in like that. And so we can put the hard drive in, and I believe we can put it in either direction. I don't think it really matters much if we go this way or this way. Obviously, if you're going to use the other half of this, you would want to keep the cables away from this part of it. There's no case window here, so we don't have to really worry about anybody seeing anything. I could also mount the drive down here on the bottom. I think it's possible, if I'm not mistaken. I think you can use the screws here on the bottom of this hard drive to mount it on the bottom. I really don't want to do that. I mean, there's a part of me that kind of wants to, but I know how dusty my home is. Despite it's clean, it's just in Arizona things get really dusty. So the hard drive can go here on the bottom. The hard drive can go here on this bracket. And then there's even more options for a 2.5-inch solid state drive, like I say, in place of the optical drive. Again, here on the bottom. And I think on this bracket with an adapter you could do it, but they don't give you any adapter for that. They do give you these, a bunch of these. And the idea behind this is you can stack two drives on top of each other and just mount one drive to the case. And then the other solid state drive or 2.5-inch drive would attach to the bracket, which attaches. So they attach to each other. So you'd have like a double decker, but you only have to mount the bottom drive, which is thinking out of the box. I like that. That's what we talk about, crowdsourcing a case like this. You get a bunch of ideas, and it's not just one engineer at one company and the politics of a company and budgets and things like that. It's just what makes the most sense regardless. And it's clearly demonstrated in this. Just kind of looking at the chat, see what I'm missing. Boldo in the chat says he's got the V1 version of this case. That's great because, you know, they didn't, I don't know how many cases of V1 were sold, but I want to say it was under 1,000 if I'm not mistaken. I thought it was a few hundred, so I don't think many people have them. The serial number on my case is like 465, so 485. So I think the first batch was 500 if I'm not mistaken. It could have been more than that. But regardless, even if it was 1,000, that's not many in the world of computers. So now I want to get my small form factor power supply. No, you know what? Before I do that, let me get the fan installed. So here on the back of the case, you'll see there are holes here and here where my finger's covering them up. And that should be for either an 80 millimeter fan or a 92 millimeter fan. And you look and the holes are pretty close together. And I know an 80 millimeter fan will fit in there. And I hope I haven't made a mistake and ordered the wrong size fan, but I'm about to find out. So here I've got the Noctua 92 millimeter fan. And it comes with a bunch of little adapter cables to control the speed, which we're going to let our motherboard take care of that. Again, when you have a good motherboard, you don't have to deal with nonsense like this, which just adds to nightmarish cable management. We've got screws for the fan, which we're not going to use because our case came with black screws, and these are silver, so they're not going to match. We've got an extension cable. And then we've got these little rubber vibration dampeners, which may actually be a good thing for this case. I might just want to use these instead of the screws. But let me make sure that this lines up properly with the holes we've got and that I haven't overstepped. Usually, before I order parts, I'll just do a real quick Google search. Yeah, we're good to go. So even though those holes are very close together, that's the difference between an 80 millimeter fan and a 92 millimeter fan. Granted, it's just 12 millimeters. However, we're looking at it on an angle, and that kind of throws it off a little bit with regards to what you would expect, or at least what I would expect. It's sort of like when you look at a 27-inch computer monitor versus a 55-inch big screen TV. 27 and 27 is what, 54? So you think it's like having two 27-inch screens, but screens are measured diagonally. So in order to have 55 inches, you would need a 27-inch monitor next to a 27-inch monitor, and then stack two more 27-inch monitors so they form 4 monitors, 2 on top, 2 on bottom. And then when you measure diagonally, that'll get you to, well, not quite 55. So it gets a little confusing sometimes when we talk about fan sizes and television sizes, monitor sizes. Now I think I don't normally use these little rubber vibration dampeners, but I think it'll be good in this case. And I don't know if it's going to cooperate with me or not. Let's see. There might be a trick to putting these on that I don't know. I don't normally use them. I think you just pretty much pull them straight through. We want the part of the fan that doesn't turn, right? That's the part the air blows out of. We want the air to evacuate out the back. And if you spin the fan, you'll see the center of the fan spins on one side and the center does not spin on the other side. So where you have the plastic support brackets that support the fan frame, that's always, in every fan I've ever seen, where the fan air comes out of. So a lot of people say, look for the arrows on the fan. Some fans have little arrow indicators that show you the rotation of the fan and the direction of the airflow, but not all fans have that. So rather than searching around for arrows that may not exist, just look for the support brackets on the frame. And like I say, that's the center part, and this center never spins on this side. That side is the side the air comes out of. And I have yet to see a fan that does not have that same design. But now that I've said it out loud, just waiting for the comments in the chat for somebody to send me a link. I'd like to see one if it does exist. I don't think it does exist. So let's see, let's pull this one through. And basically all I'm doing to tighten this down so you can see is I'm just kind of pushing it on this and grabbing the end of it, and it's real stretchy. And like I say, I don't normally install these, so I could be doing this the hard way, but I believe that's how it's going to go in. And then we just got 2 more there. You can see here in the packaging that came with the fan. The reason I don't normally use these is, again, in Arizona, things that are rubber tend to dry out pretty quickly. We have very little humidity here, and rubber parts generally will start to harden. I'll tell you what's really bad are like rubber bands. Sometimes I like to save rubber bands, use them to tie up cables and whatnot that I have laying around. And I'll go to use one, and I'll go to pull the rubber band, it'll just break into 3 pieces. And it's only been sitting for a few months, and it just loses all of its moisture and elasticity, and it just shatters, just breaks. But you can see, you can actually pull on these pretty rough. It's rubber. So it's meant to stretch. That one's in, that one's in. And this one in the top. Just kind of working right up here. I want to get the little nub in the hole. And then I've just got one left, which will be down here, this bottom corner. And I'm not sure how I'm going to grab that one yet. Didn't really think that one through. USB cable's a little in the way. But just more of the same. It helps to have small hands to get in there and do this. This is where screws would be a lot easier. You wouldn't have to deal with getting into a tight space like that. And I'm just doing something a little different this time, because this case and the whole build is quite different from what I normally do. which is why I decided to do it. That was my motivation. It wasn't because I needed a computer. I just wanted to do something different. Of course, by now, since I've finally gotten around to it, there's numerous other YouTube videos that show some builds using this case or a version of, you know, may not be version 1, you know, maybe any of the other versions. So it's not as unique as it would have been if I had more time to devote to it. However, it's still a really cool case, and I'm glad I've got it. It is a neat, well thought out, probably the most thought out case I've ever seen. Now, if these guys could do a mid-tower, that would be great. It'd probably be too much money, though. So this last corner is a little more difficult. I'm having a hard time getting in there. Come on. Did I get it? It's still not quite in. That feels better. Yeah, those are kind of a pain, but totally worth it because it's going to be really silent without having any vibration coming from the fan. And I guess I knocked off the USB 3 cable when I did that, which is fine. I've got a fan header, looks like right here, which we'll use for this fan, right there. And then this can go back where it was, like so. Okay, so here's our build so far. You'll see the bottom has a lot of vents for air. The front with our optical drive. A big old gap right here where air can come in, which is always a good and welcome thing. And of course the back. And the top is vented as well. Set that right there. Now, let's do the power supply. They have a 450 watt version of this, which I was debating on because I was thinking I could put a discrete graphics card in here, but then I got back to the CPU again. It's just an i3, so it really wouldn't be suited for any of the GTX, you know, even a 1050 would be probably overkill for the rest of the system. It's not going to be used for gaming. If I sell the system, you know, if somebody's interested in buying it, I'd certainly be open to discussion, bearing in mind what I've got in it. It's an interesting bracket right here. I'm not sure what that's for. Screws and screws. Silica gel, do not eat. Those things really need salt. All right, so here's our tiny little small form factor, or SFX, sometimes SFF, power supply. And I've got the little power supply bracket here, and I got to remember how I took this out. Did it go on this way? Did it go on? Which way did this go on? Let's see. As I recall, I don't remember. Did it go on like this? No, that's not going to work. Did it go on like this? No. This is a problem when you take things apart and you don't remember how they came apart. I mean, look, I can go online and look it up, but I'm sure in just a few minutes I will figure it out here, so bear with me while like I said, after you build a certain number of computers, they all more or less go together the same. So once you figure out one, you should be good to go for pretty much any case. Just trying to remember if this went horizontally or vertically. It looks like it would have gone. It's not going to go there. It's too tight. Could it go here? No, it's not going to go here. Oh, I'm so confused right now. I remember taking screws out of the top on both sides. Just trying to remember how and why. So the bracket's not wide enough to reach both sides. I'm wondering if maybe did it attach to... No. It's going to take me a minute to figure this out. I believe... Let's see. I believe it's going to go on like so. Or would it go on like this? So it can go on either way, but only one way is probably going to fit inside of the case. But I'm trying to remember. Was it like this, maybe? Well, that's not going to work. It doesn't line up at all. Let's turn it around this way. Well, that's not going to line up with anything that way. This has got to be the top. Am I going at it from the wrong side? Is that what I'm doing? No. For those of you that know how this goes in, it's really frustrating to watch somebody. Welcome to my world, right? It doesn't quite look right. I'm missing something. Sure it doesn't go on like, no, it's not going to go on like that, is it? No, 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 because the lid's got to go on. It's not going to go that way. I remember I took it out. Just looking at all the different all the possibilities, like Porky Pig over here, of how this can go in. This looks really familiar to me. There's two screw holes, and then the opening, which is usually for one of these tabs up here on the top, which has either got to be this tab, which wouldn't make sense because it's going to hit the RAM that way. It's got to go, it's got to be this way, right? But no, it's not going to work either. Man, I wish I remember how I took this apart. All right, time for me to look it up because I'm getting frustrated. It shouldn't be taking this long. What I've liked about the case thus far is how intuitive things have been to remove and reassemble. And I'm surprised I'm struggling that much on the adapter. It seems like all I have to do really is go back and look at the first part of this video. Let me just take a quick look online. I'll just type in SFX power supply install Ncase M1, and I should see some images. Yeah, Corsair makes a small form factor. They make like the SF450, but again, it's like $80 for their power supply. It's extraordinarily expensive. And, you know, I'm not building a system of that caliber. Okay, so it looks like, from what I'm seeing online, it looks like the bracket's going to go in this way. I don't know how that's, no, it shows it. It shows it with these holes, these slots are going to be facing you guys. So it does go behind the motherboard. I mean, I see two screw holes back here. That's exactly what it does. There it is. I was thrown off before because it was hitting the RAM. But I can see now the error of my ways. There are two small holes back behind the motherboard on the motherboard tray, that this bracket right there goes basically behind the motherboard and in front of the motherboard tray. It fits right in between there. And those are the other two screws I must have removed. I was thinking I removed two from each side, but clearly that's not what I did. I'm remembering it wrong. So I think the takeaway in all of this ultimately is that no man is an island, and well, if you continue to work on the same parts over and over and over again, you're going to appear to be an expert and really know what you're doing. And when you bring in foreign equipment that you're not familiar with, you may appear to not know what you're doing, but the build process is essentially the same, and whether or not you're familiar with a particular case shouldn't make you intimidated or afraid to work on it. Once you've done a few, like I say, they all mostly come together and pull apart more or less the same with minor differences. And then each new case you get, each new experience just adds to your knowledge. And when you start seeing the same cases over and over again, you'll be able to rip right through them, and people falsely think that that makes you an expert. It just makes you really experienced at a particular case. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love nothing better than to have a bunch of cases like this to work on all day. This would make my day, because after I built about 4 or 5 of them, it would be sunk into my memory how they'd come apart and go back together again. So which way do I want to put this in? I can put it in this way, or I can put it in this way. If this gets mounted in that direction, which side? So the fan cables are going to come out this way, which is a shortcut towards the motherboard. If I turn it around the other way, we have the fan on that side, and the cables come out the opposite side, which is not as preferred. However, the extension cable then will plug straight on, versus if I turn this around, then this extension cable has to go over the switch, which is, I don't know how well you can see that, which is not ideal because it blocks our ability to hit that switch. So for that reason, I think I'm going to put it on like this. And let's get some screws and secure that into place. You know what, I can just use the screws off the old power supply. They should be the same ones. What'd I do with the old power supply? You know what's around here. What'd I do with it? Oh, it's back there. Don't mind me, I'm just talking to myself. Alright, so I'm going to take the screws off of this bracket. This is a bracket that shipped with the case, if you guys recall in part 1. That, like I say, you can pull out the small form factor bracket and the hard drive / radiator bracket to make room for this, so you're making a bit of a sacrifice. I'm glad I did this though, because I knew it was possible, but I had no idea of the frustrations I was going to face with regards to where the switch is located and whether or not the power adapter has excess plastic around it that prevented 3 other power supplies from fitting. I would never have known that had I not tried it. But there gets to be a certain point where I go, okay, the system's got this great potential to hold so much more equipment, and if I don't have those brackets back in there, they might get misplaced or I might forget what they're for, and I'd rather have the system available to the next owner with all of the brackets possible so that they can customize it to their needs. So that was my logic in that. And let's see, which way was I putting this on? Like this, I believe. Set that there, and let me go grab I'll grab my power screwdriver and do this quickly. It's so weird that nothing on the other side of the bracket helps line it up with the power supply. Interesting. Very interesting. It's not threading right. Something's not right. Are these the right screws? Let's see. They should be. Yeah, those are the right screws. Started. It's not going in straight. That one did. Now it looks like on these small form factor power supplies you can use either 3 screws or 2 or 4. It looks like there's one hole here in the middle. I'm going to just stick with the 4 corners. There we go. And then this one I'm going to have to just going to have to sort of rethread through because it just didn't go in straight. It happens. It's fine. It's tightened down. It's good. So that's going to give us our power connector close to this edge, which is then going to enable me to run this connector right here. Oh, or not. Oh, it looks like... So the connector has to go on over that switch regardless. I hadn't thought of that. So if I'm going to be covering up the switch either way, I think I want to turn it around because the reasoning and the logic no longer apply once it's put into practice. Such is life. So we're going to do this one more time. I'm just going to turn it around the other way. I really don't think it matters which way the fan faces because remember the power supply fan is going to suck air in just to the power supply and then spit the air out, which is going to be out through the top. Good thing they make those of metal, right? So that's twice I've dropped that. All right, so that's the way I had it originally. Let's turn it around this way. This would help if I had another set of hands, I'll tell you that. I think I'm going to just go with the handheld screwdriver for the moment. Okay. Now that I've got that started, like butter. Look at that. So you'll see there's no fear in, if you're not sure if something can go in one way or the other, to just pick one and then try to install it. If you run into any obstacles, or you decide that even something as simple as the cable management would be improved by having the cables closer to the motherboard, which was one of my thoughts I mentioned out loud there, to have the cables coming out of this side rather than the other side. And then keeping in mind that this cable here has to plug into the top. It's going to come in from, well, let's just see what happens before I get too far ahead of myself. This is going to go in through here, and then behind the motherboard. That's the part that threw me. Got to go behind the motherboard. Clearly, it would make sense to do this before you put the motherboard in, so you're not in this position that I'm in right now. And then it's just going to screw into position right like that. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So let's turn this around, and I still have the screws out from the other day. Should use the exact same screws. Where's my other driver? Where's my narrow driver? You definitely want to be using a magnetized screwdriver. It is absolutely critical. It should be considered mandatory anytime you're working on a computer to be using a magnetized driver. And we should be able to get one in here, ideally. Nope. That ain't happening. So it's occurring to me now that this must have to go on the other side. Instead of between the motherboard, it's got to go back like that, and that makes more sense now. And the reason for that is because the way the screw is tightening down, that's what let me know that I did not have that in correctly. So again, just by fidgeting a little bit with it, you're not damaging anything, and then you can kind of figure out through the process of trial and error. This case does not come with instructions. You have to more or less do all your research online, and they do a really good job on the Ncase website explaining all the specifications. But they really could use some documentation. Not that I would read it. And this is why. This is not rocket science, just a little common sense. Don't be afraid of getting it wrong. It doesn't matter. We all learn at different paces. You go at whatever speed you need to go at to where it makes sense to you. This is obviously the path I had to take, which is installing it every way but the right way. But I got there, right? And nothing got hurt or damaged. It just took a little bit more time. And once again, I've never worked on this before. I've got no instruction manual to fall back on. And it doesn't scare me one bit. I enjoy it. It's like, it's a puzzle. You find the pieces that fit. I don't need instructions showing me how the pieces go together. That's it. So that bracket is installed. Now I should be able to take this power cable and perhaps I can run it up. See, it bothers me that that's going to cover up the power switch. That's the only thing I don't like. I'm going to have to turn that on now because I won't be able to get to it otherwise, and plug that straight on just like so. If the switch was above it or below it, that would be better. It's just one of those, once the case is put back together anyway, you're never going to reach that switch. You're always going to either pull the plug here or pull it from the wall. You're not going to be able to reach around and hit a switch. So I suppose it ultimately doesn't matter that it's covering that switch up. Let me give you a closer look at what I'm talking about here. So when you're ordering a power supply, if you look for one that has the switch in a different location, let me pull this extension cable off. You'll see that when the extension cable goes on, it only goes on in one direction. It's going to cover that switch. If this third prong was on the other side where the cable went on the other way, I could flip the power supply around. But like I said, it's not like you're going to be able to reach the switch in any event unless you had the cover removed. So I'm worried about something that doesn't really apply in this particular build. Now with that put together, I can throw the cover back on it. I don't think, oh no I can't. I still have the cabling to do here. So let me get the wire tie off of the power supply cables. Come on. Someone really had a good time with that. Let's get that out of there. Now you really don't have any cable management with a case like this. One of the advantages of using the small form factor power supply is your cables aren't going to be as long as they are with a desktop ATX power supply. You'll see that this motherboard power connector is quite short, and it's just going to run right up here like this and plug directly into the board, just like every power connector ever. The clip's got to go, I had it upside down, the clip's got to go towards the outside edge of the board, and then that snaps in place. And then we've got, let's see, that's for a graphics card, that's for a hard drive or solid state. There's our 4-pin CPU connector. Make sure the cables are as well untangled as you can get them to be reasonably at this stage. There's no way you're going to be able to run the cable pretty much anywhere else but, you know, in the front where everybody's going to see it. We can deal with tidying up our cables a bit later, primarily so that our cables don't fall into any of the fans when this computer is transported around. But there's no case window. I do believe I've seen photos online of one of these cases with a case window on it. And I don't know if that was a mod or if they sell it that way now, if that was one of the versions. I've got different, let me use the SATA cables that came with the motherboard, because that one, the color's wrong. And just going to look through some of the photos here to see if anybody else has installed their power supply the same way I did. Yeah, they're using the same power supply and the fan is facing the back. So they've installed it. They came to the same conclusion I did, which is reassuring. Oh, that's something else they improved. Apparently, some motherboards, this area, the cutout for the support bracket for a third-party cooler is a bit tight, and they widened that, and they kind of moved it up and widened it a bit to make it easier for a bracket to fit back behind the socket for the CPU. Apparently that was a bit of an issue. I'm looking at a photo online, and it shows half the bracket you can't even see. So you would have had to have attached that bracket. I was going to say you would have had to have attached it while the motherboard was out of the case, but that's not true. Because the bracket, just as long as you can seat it, you're going to put the screws in from the other side. So that's not too terrible. Wish I could show you guys these photos. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to put a link to this in the chat if you guys want to check out, see the photos I'm looking at. Here we go. So there's a link in the chat. And Carey, when are you moving? If that's a question in reference to Michigan, it's going to be a few years. Having a house is a good thing, but it's also an anchor. It kind of keeps you from just packing up and going, unless you have a lot of money, which I don't. But it's on the bucket list. A few years, folks. All right, so I was getting the... Okay, so this is our Noctua packaging. All this Noctua stuff. Go over there. No, go. What's this? It's bubble pack. Go. Bracket for the CPU, for the power supply. That can keep the work area nice and clean. That's all I'm saying, you know? Keep it open and available. This bracket will go with the case. This is going to get back in the box of spare parts. And data cable. So in my Gigabyte motherboard box, I have the antennas for the Wi-Fi. Oh, there's the SATA cables right there. That's what I want. That's what I wanted right there. We'll come back to the antennas in just a moment. So let me come around, and we're going to plug in, stepping on trash. We're going to plug in one of these SATA data cables. I think maybe we'll use this 90-degree angle one, if we can. Can we? It's going the wrong way, Carey. That's not going to work. All right, well then we're going to use this one, and that's going to go right on here, just like that. Just like, did you hear what I said? I said just like that. Like, come on. Just like that. There we go. Sort of. Not really. What's the problem? It's very tight. Now this can go through here. And again, I'm going to worry about the cable management stuff a little bit later. And that's going to plug in. Let's get this blue one out of here. I'm done with that. That's going to plug in right down here. There we go. And then the other cable, which what did I do with it? It's right here. We'll use this one on the hard drive, so I can plug this end in up here, which was port 0, the white port here on the top. There we go. I'm just going to leave that for just a moment because I want to picture this in my head now. This is going to go on like so. Yes, yes. And do I want my hard drive cables coming out that side or coming out this side? This side looks like it's wide open, so I think that'll be the direction I want to go in. And then I need my drive, and the drive can go in either direction. Drive doesn't care if it's vertical or horizontal or right side up or upside down. Oh, you know what? Let me run power. I'm so scatterbrained. Let me run power to the optical drive right now so I can put the front cover back on. I think I'm going to have to do it this way, unfortunately. I think I'm going to have to use the end of the cable to go up like so. So you can see how the data cable and the power cable are just going to go side by side here on this adapter, this Slimline SATA adapter. That being done, I can put the cover back on now. Look at that, huh? And as far as that goes, I can also put this cover back on. I'm not going to put the screw in it yet in case I have to take it back off. There we go. God, I love that. Every case should open and close that easily. Nice. So once again, we're still going to have some cable management stuff to deal with, but I'm not really concerned about that. That's just making it look pretty at the end. Besides, when I put the cover on it, you're never going to see the inside anyway, so. But I do take a lot of pride in my builds, and I will do the cable management. So in this bag, we've got these little rubber washers, and these little rubber washers have a little ridge on them. Let me see if I can bring this up to you and show you. So you see how there's these holes, right? And you can take one of these washers, and it's got a groove in it for you to slide into the hole. And we can just push it up. It should just lock that right into place, right there. See that? And we can use any of these holes that we want to use. Ideally, let's take a look at the hard drive and just take a quick look at where I want to mount this before I put these rubber washers in. And once again, these rubber washers are something that are going to dry out relatively quickly here in the Arizona desert. It's part of life in the desert. So what I'm looking at is when I line this drive up, if I put it in this direction, it's got to go in that first hole and the second to last hole there. You see how that's lining up? Unless I turn it around and put it in this way, or if I want the drive to stick out a bit. But will I have enough room for the cables if I go that far back? It's just not a good idea, I don't think. I think I want to go this. I think I want to go this way with it. And I could go one more down, which I think I'm going to do. Could I go all the way down? Certainly does not seem to be designed for that at all. Turn it the other way around. Maybe it's possible. I'm not exactly sure how you're supposed to put two drives in this, unless one drive goes upside down and the other drive goes right side up. That probably would be the way you would have to make that work with two drives. I think I'm going to go all the way on the... Do I want to go on the inside or the outside? I think I want to go on the inside. Just looks cleaner to me. So I think what I'm going to do, if that's the case, so we'll take these little rubber washers now, and I'm going to insert them where I think I want to put the drive. Remember, because there's no instruction manual and I haven't done any research on this, there are alternate places I could place the drive. I could place it, as I mentioned, down at the very bottom of the computer, but because of the dust buildup and the vibration that occurs down there, I just don't think it's a very good location for the drive. I understand the drive is going to be on these rubber washers to help counter that vibration, but being that close to the floor makes me a bit nervous. It's not going to have very good airflow there. So I'd much prefer to have it up on this bracket, and furthermore, I want a reason to put this bracket back in. I don't want to just put the bracket in empty. And I don't want to not include the bracket because it's something that could very easily get lost. And then if somebody says, hey, I want to buy that from you, and I forget to give them the bracket, it's a custom part. So I don't know if it's possible to order just the bracket from the folks who make the case, or how long that would take to get to you. So I'm just trying to think of an excuse why I would keep this bracket in there. Like I said, if somebody wants to add liquid cooling to it, an all-in-one cooler, radiator, either 140 or I guess a 280, right? Two 140s would fit in there. I think that's about right. It's also interesting how the hard drive bracket, that comes off and it's offset. You see how it sticks out above the top. Now, to mount the hard drive, if you recall in the first part of the video the other day when I was showing this off, I mentioned there were screws with a shoulder on them. What does that mean? A screw with a shoulder on it means that, and I don't know if the camera's going to focus very well, but it's threaded here and it's completely smooth on the bottom half of the post that sticks out from the screw. And this non-threaded post is called a shoulder. And the reason that exists is primarily for a situation like this that I'm going to demonstrate right now, where we're going to put the drive in. Let's go... Could go upside down. Go like that. I was going to stick too far out that way. Yeah, it's not lining up upside down. That ain't gonna happen. So let's turn it around. Oh, wait a minute. I was gonna go upside down this way. What am I doing? Right? No. So easy to get turned around. I want the back of the drive facing that side, so we go on this way. Oh, I see what I did. I'm boo-booed. I got these rubber grommets installed in the wrong spot. I wanted to go second from the end, and then I wanted to go all the way to the end on the other side. So that's where I made my little boo-boo. So we're just going to pull those right back out. But there you go, just figure it out. Not a big deal. It's not the most efficient way, but this is why I say I think if you want to be a computer technician for a living, you should go get a job at a retail place like Geek Squad or Office Max or Staples or whatever they have in your country where it's a big retailer, where you're going to have just all kinds of weird stuff showing up for you to work on. And that's why I recommend it, because you can get your hands on so many different case designs, so many different motherboards and CPUs and combinations thereof. It's better than anything you're ever going to see online, you know, to go through life and experience that in the real world. And it's going to much better prepare you for, you know, being out in the wild, if you will. And you're going to have that confidence then after you've figured out several of these cases, you'll realize they all more or less go together the same. So now I can put the drive in upside down, which is exactly what I wanted to do to begin with. And I'm going to grab one of these shoulder screws, which you can turn with your hands. You don't necessarily have to use a screwdriver. Let me just get one side lined up. There we go. Once again, no need to use a screwdriver on those. You don't need to tighten them that tight. You just don't want your hard drive falling out. That's not a good thing. So that's number 2. And number 3. And then finally, number 4 is going to go right there. Part of the reason I wanted that drive upside down is for the looks. Remember that when I take this panel off, you're primarily going to see this bracket sticking out at you like this, and it's going to have the name of the drive right there where you can see it. It also keeps the cables over to this side, but even if I'd have flipped the drive around the other way, all you'd be seeing is a circuit board here, and I'd still have the cables coming in on this side. So it's purely visual. And then also by using the lower bracket, if I want to add another hard drive, I think another drive can mount right on top of that. Let me grab another drive to verify. Since I don't have an owner's manual, because it doesn't come with one, at least somebody can use this video if they're building one of these in the future as a reference. So here I've just got another Western Digital standard 3.5-inch solid state drive, the standard thickness of a drive. It's not one of those thin ones. And this should go in. Yep. That's exactly the way that would work. It puts a little space between the two drives, but if you had to do it, you certainly could, which is very, very, very cool. Of course, your adapters are going to be opposite, but that's actually a better thing since they won't hit each other that way. So let me just set this down back here. What do we got going on in the chat today? Cool. All right, we got about 348 people. Everybody welcome. I know some of you are just joining us. We're right in the process now of finishing up this Ncase M1 mini ITX build. I'm not going to use that. Again, I'm not going to do any cable management on this right now. I'm going to deal with that later. This part can go on here like so. This is our SATA data connector. I'm just going to use that 90-degree angled one here on the hard drive. It seems like a good place for it. Normally on a mid-tower or a full tower, I would use that on the optical drive, but that's not going to work on this build. And then these are the two remaining SATA power connectors coming off of that said optical drive because our power supply doesn't give us any others. They're all on the one cable. The other cables we have left over is two Molex with a floppy drive connector, which I would have rather have seen these be SATA. I don't know why they did that other than maybe for fans. And then the only other power cable we have on this power supply is for a graphics card. It's a 6-pin for a graphics card. And obviously it wouldn't be a heavy-duty graphics card. We only have a 300-watt power supply. For this rig right here, this probably is only going to use 200 watts in total anyway, the way it's configured right now. Some people are just so fixated on having a whole bunch of power regardless of how much they're using, which is like being consumed with how much horsepower your car has, regardless of the fact of how fast you need to drive it or whether or not you're towing. Some people just get kind of hung up on on having more, regardless if they need it or not. This is a common problem in the build community where people are more interested in impressing their friends than necessarily meeting their individual needs. What I want to make sure is that none of these cables are going to get in the way of the fan. Thing looks okay, and I will clean that up with cable management when I'm done. I should be able to go ahead and just put this screw back into the top because I'm feeling confident now, so that can go back in. And then this has got to go, let's see, let's just see. I'm just going to squish the cables in there for now. I will say, despite how well this case is built, it would certainly help to have another set of hands to hold things like this bracket in a position until I can get a screw started in it. And as you can see, I can do it, but it's a little bit of a balancing act. Sort of like patting your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time. There we go. And that's good. And we'll come around to this side. And then we've got, oh, that's a different kind of screw. Why am I one screw short? Something's not right. That looks pretty good. There's another screw that goes up here. I don't know why it's missing. I know I took them out. Let me go ahead and put this side panel back on since I've got it available. That doesn't fit that way. Does it fit this way? There we go. And this one I thought had two screws holding it in, but maybe it didn't. Maybe I was wrong. I swore it had two. No, the panel does not secure in it on either side. I thought it did. I see what I did now. I see where my false conclusion came from, was this bracket. There are two places for screws. So it means I've got an extra one for some reason. I don't know why. So these round-headed screws are the ones I must have taken out, which would explain why I thought they were holding the side panel in, but actually the only side panel that has a screw holding it in is the top. And like I say, that's been removed on version 5 of the current version of this case. There, it's completely done. Now, you wouldn't know the cable management looked terrible because it's all covered up. All right, let me fire this bad boy up. I don't understand why I've got a spare screw. I'm missing, I must not have put something back, but I don't know what it was. Missing something. The only other thing is that power supply bracket. Well, I can't pull that off now. I've screwed it in. Let's go back in here one more time. Just take a quick look. Am I missing a spot? There's two there. There's two there. So that looks right to me. Doesn't look like there's any other place where a screw can go. So put that one back. That looks good. Ideally, I wouldn't put these panels back on until after I've test fired the system, but I'm really confident. So you know something interesting is going to happen. And did I miss any place on this where screws could potentially go? Got the 4 there, which I never took out, 2 here. It had to come from somewhere. Well, it's obviously not going to make any difference in the operation of the computer. I just hate the idea. My OCD doesn't like the idea that I've got an extra screw, and I don't understand why, but I will figure that out when I do the cable management, because I want to get this done sometime today. As he continues to look, I know it's there somewhere. No idea. Anyway, here's our final build. This is what it looks like. There's our top slot for the optical drive right up there. Like I say, they do sell a different cover if you don't want to have the optical drive version that covers this slot right here. If you can see it. That's where your optical discs are going to go in and out that way. And it's pretty lightweight. You could easily tuck it under your arm and take it to a friend's house. Do some LAN gaming. Got all our documentation and instructions, the old hard drive, a couple of spare screws over there, lots of spare screws here. These will all go in the bag. All of these connectors for the Noctua I think are trash. I don't think they should go with the system because that'll only confuse the end user. The packaging and the fan screws, the original silver fan screws can go. This is the box of spare parts that came with the Ncase, which includes the fan filters, which, like I say, they've got these little notches where the screws, you know, this kind of twists on around the shoulder on a screw. And now they're magnetized. And it was interesting because there are some third-party manufacturers that were selling magnetized fan filters before they decided to step up and do it themselves that way. So you could continue to spend even more money on your case. Like if you had the version 1 case, you should know that those fan filters are available where you can just buy them magnetically, and the links for that are at the Ncase website. No, there is no eject button. You'll have to eject your optical discs by right-clicking on the drive and choose eject, which really is the smarter way to do it as far as I'm concerned anyway. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to move my monitor over here and my keyboard and mouse, so I'm going to be blind to the chat room here for a few minutes. And we're going to test fire this. It should just boot up and run. Like I said, I've already got Windows 10 pre-installed on here. And let me grab the monitor. This will be really embarrassing if it doesn't work. There's only so much testing I can do off camera. But this should do it. I'm pretty confident it'll be okay. I've got antennas in the motherboard box. That's what there's 2 antennas here for the Wi-Fi. But my concern is the Wi-Fi is going to be too weak to do a live stream. And what I'm going to do is, once this boots up, assuming it boots up, I'm going to switch the live stream over to this unit just to see if it's got enough power for me to broadcast from. I'm curious if that's going to work. let's see, I need my keyboard. I'll just plug the keyboard in back here. Anywhere is fine. Okay, it's got power, keyboard, video. Let me grab a networking cable and plug it into my LAN so that we're not running off the Wi-Fi, because I'm going to need faster than 300, I think, to do a live stream. This motherboard has 2 Ethernet ports. I never quite understood why. I understand some gamers, I don't know, use 2 Ethernet ports. I just think there's better ways. And let's see what happens. I need to get an optical disc because I want to make sure that it will operate properly. Let me put this drive back when I'm gone. I think I got this from, where did I get this from? I'll just go there. I just need a disk. I know I've got some optical disc laying around here somewhere. Oh, here we go. One of these will, well, you know what I'll do? I'll just grab a Windows 7 installation disk. That'll work. Okay. Did it boot? What have I missed? I see a screen. We're at the desktop. And my keyboard and mouse are still on the other side. I need to move those over here. Let me come back around. Everything's nice and quiet. Fan is spinning. I can feel the air coming out the back. Let me just pull this cover off. I want to make sure all the fans are turning. CPU fan's turning. Our new Noctua fan is turning. I've got dust all over my hands and I'm leaving fingerprints all over this thing. So everything is working as it should, as I predicted. Love the way that clips together. It's just awesome. Just getting dust everywhere. So this is just a standard Windows 7 installation DVD. And I want to make sure that the computer can read the disk okay. Let's see what happens. It took it. Let me go to my File Explorer. This PC, I should see a DVD. There's no DVD drive listed. I wonder why. It's just not there. And it just, oh. It's reading it. But I wonder why the optical drive isn't showing up. We know the optical drive has power. It's having some difficulty reading this disk. I just think that's really clever how that goes in. But I am a bit concerned that the drive is not showing up. Everything feels pretty snug. So I'm not sure why we don't see it. Let me go back into the BIOS and see if the BIOS sees the drive. I mean, the connector's on tight. I don't want system tuning. I want boot option 1, boot option 2. It shows the DVD drive. It's in there. It absolutely shows it. I guess I can turn fast boot on. And we'll leave everything else. OS we can select. I mean, it offers Windows 8, WHQL. I'm going to leave that blank. And then we're going to go to Save and Exit. So I know that the BIOS sees the optical drive, but the operating system is not. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but we're going to find out here in just a minute. And obviously the boot up time would be changed drastically by keeping the SSD in there. It's the single best upgrade you can do to any computer, as far as I'm concerned, is moving from a mechanical drive to a solid state. You will always see an improvement with that. And it should detect new hardware for the optical drive. Yeah, it's showing up this time. I don't know why. And if I put that in, it may actually have to go in the other direction. It looks like the head is moving back and forth across the label, so it's probably going to spit it back out. And it looks like I have to put it in this direction, which seems backwards to me. But remember, this is all about space efficiency. Yeah, there it is. There's our Windows 7 right there. I can hear it spinning. See what it does. You can see the head moving back and forth on the optical drive. I'm assuming you guys can see that. There it is. There's Windows 7 install. I should be able to right click on this and choose eject. There it is. So it's got to go in with the label facing away, which is pretty strange, but that's fine. It works. I wish there was a way to turn that around, but it would mean the drive would have to go in the other way. And I don't see that as an option. So I guess that's just the way it works. So now, let's put this back on. Now here's where things are going to get really interesting. Got the cover back on, as I'm leaving dust all over this because of the dust that was on my Windows 7 box. Let me just rinse my hands off because it's driving me crazy. Everything I touch and leaving dust on. So what I want to do now is I have this video capture device. I have a couple of video captures. The one I use primarily, the one I'm using right now, is a PCI Express card that's plugged into my video editing workstation. But what I've got here, in fact, I've shown this in other videos in the past, but I'm going to show it to you guys in case you haven't seen it before. This is an external video capture card, and it'll take HDMI or DVI, or you can use a VGA to DVI adapter. You could go into one of these, and this is S-Video here, I think, to run composite in for, I don't know, like a Wii or something, I don't know. And on this side, USB, which is going to provide the power it needs. There's no separate power adapter used for this. And you just install a couple drivers. Windows 10 will not find the driver for this. You have to install the driver. And the other thing that's a little tricky is when you plug, it comes with a USB cable, it's USB 3, and when you plug it in, when it goes in, it looks like it goes in, but it's not. You have to wait till it clicks. Now it's in. And what it'll do when it's halfway in like that is it'll power on, you'll get a light, it'll appear that everything's working, but you won't get any video signal from it. So I was struggling with that the other day, and I don't use this very often, and I was kind of curious if it'll be able to keep up with the feed with the same quality you guys are seeing right now. So I'm going to plug this in right up here to the top. And what I have to do now is start the live stream here and disconnect the camera. So everybody in this live stream is going to be kicked out because the stream's going to end. and then the next stream is going to start as soon as I get this started. So just so you know, you should get a notification from YouTube, just as you did for this live stream, when the next one goes live. It should happen here in just a couple minutes, and then we'll see if it handles 1080 output. I don't know if it will or it won't. Ideally, all of the settings should be the same, so let's see what happens. I am going to start up OBS. OBS is a free program you can download, and again, using it with a video capture card. So bring up OBS Studio. And I need to stop the stream here and start it over here. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to temporarily hook my keyboard, mouse, and monitor back up so I can see what I'm doing over here. All right, guys, I will see you back in just a moment. Let's hope everything goes well and that I see you on the other side. I think I can do this without moving the monitor. Should be able to just have this cable reach. Yep, it's going to reach fine. And then I need to just grab my keyboard and mouse dongle from the back here and put it over here. All right. See you guys in a minute. This should be working. Let's go back to YouTube. Okay, let's try this one more time. You guys should be getting audio now. Are we getting anything? We got audio? Okay, so let me go back and re-explain what happened. The StarTech capture card is not a supported card. It's not a supported video capture card in OBS. I guess everybody likes these AverMedia capture cards. They're quite expensive though. I've got a few $100s wrapped up, probably $400 wrapped up in StarTech capture cards. I probably need to update with, someone mentioned the Elgato card. Might want to look at the AverMedia cards. But ultimately what I had to do is, I'll explain to you what happened. On OBS, when I was going into these video properties, which right down here, let's see if I can zoom in and give you guys a better look at what I'm seeing. Way down here, what I'm looking at is going to the video capture device and going to its properties. And when I bring the properties up, there's an elevator bar right here that I didn't notice. And all the way at the bottom, it says use custom audio device. Now, normally that's not checked. It usually just says capture audio only. That's the default setting. And I'm just choosing use custom audio device and then choosing the video capture card here and choosing analog 01 wave in and then clicking OK. And now when I talk, I can see this bar moving, which is what I was looking for before, to know that my audio was not going out. And so it was a very easy fix when I knew what to look for, but what would have been easier would be to have a capture card that is supported. And unfortunately, I don't know why, but StarTech's card is not supported. Now, I don't know how well the video quality is coming through right now. I don't know if there's any blur or motion issue. Put my jazz hands up, but and I'm losing a lot of light. So let me know what you think of the video and audio quality. This is all going through, once again, the system we just showed you that we built right over here, the Ncase M1, and you can see that the cable coming from the camera, the HDMI cable right here is plugged in. We've got the blue light showing everything's working, and we've got the USB 3 cable going out to the back of the computer. So that's how that's done. And I'm actually impressed that it's moving as quickly as it is, the frame rates. And then if this video looks better than it normally does, that means I have mistakenly configured this better than the one over in the video editing machine that I normally would be using for this. So it looks like, it says there's a little lag. Is the audio in sync with my lips, or it's probably not. I probably need to add a delay in there. But yeah, there's going to be a lag between what I say and when you see it. Obviously, that's just a normal live transmission issue. It's a little choppy. It's in sync, perfectly in sync. Okay, good. Good. I mean, I'm actually really impressed that an external capture card is performing that well for this task. But what a challenge to get that audio to work. And it was just really 2 clicks of the mouse. It was just I wasn't clicking in the right place. OBS is one of those things. I set it up and it starts working. I have no idea what I did. And then I never go back and look at it until I try and add something or change something, and then I have no memory. And then, of course, the versions keep changing. OBS is a good thing. It keeps getting updated regularly. And so I'm still using a very old version of OBS on the video editing machine that I normally stream from. I would expect the other machine to have even better performance. But it's good to know that a Core i3 is doing the job just fine for this task. It seems anybody could easily do it. And screen is not centered or filled. Oh, you know what? I can see that now. There is an issue there with the screen, and I think it has to do with there's another setting in here that I think I was playing around with it, and in doing so made things a little worse. I think it's actually in the video decoder. No, it set that back automatically. Let's try that. It still doesn't quite look right. I'll play with it some more later tonight. Like I say, I've got an appointment coming up here. I was just excited that I could see the audio was working so quickly. There does seem to be a strange issue with the resolution that's on here. It should be 1920 by 1080, and it should fit. Sure what's going on there. It does seem to be off to one side. It's still a configuration issue for me. It's not on you guys, it's on me. Getting closer. Actually, that may have fixed it. I might have just fixed it by mistake. So, all right, well, now let's see if the video is any better. The audio should be the same as it was. And I've got to go back to this other machine and configure the latest version of OBS on there. And then I'll see if I can match the settings so that my video quality will be improved. I didn't intend for that to happen. I was just making sure that this little machine that we just built to see if it had the power to do this, and clearly it does, and then mistakenly stumbled onto a better video setting for the capture card. And now that I've struggled through the audio setting with OBS, I know why it's happening, and I know how to fix it. I probably won't soon forget it. Since I went through this live, it's more likely to stick with me as something to watch for in the future, and maybe some incentive to get a more modern capture card than what StarTech has. I'm a little disappointed that they're not being supported in OBS, but it is what it is. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and thanks for all your help in helping me get this issue resolved. And I'll see y'all again real soon. Bye for now.